The first body was found at 6:17 in the morning. Commuters had already begun lining the river path when a maintenance worker noticed something caught in the reeds beneath the eastern bridge. At first, he thought it was trash, fabric tangled in algae, heavy with river water. Then he saw the hand. By 6:32, uniformed officers had cordoned off the walkway. By 6:41, the coroner confirmed what the current had tried to erase. Male, late 20s, blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, wrists bruised. No wallet, no phone, no shoes. By 7:12, Detective Rachel Monroe stepped under the bridge. If you believe crime scenes speak clearly, stay with this one, because this scene whispered and then lied. Rachel moved without theatrics. Fitted denims, dark crop top beneath her worn denim jacket, army boots already slick with river mud, her posture relaxed but deliberate, shoulders squared against the damp morning air. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. The river moved slowly today, brown water folding over itself, carrying silt, cigarette butts, secrets. The eastern bridge groaned overhead as traffic rolled across steel. Uniformed officers briefed her quickly. No ID, no obvious defensive wounds. Drag marks start about 20 feet upstream. Looks like he was dumped. Rachel crouched near the body, careful not to disturb the mud pattern. The victim's head angled unnaturally toward the bank. Hair matted, dried blood at the hairline. The back of his jacket torn. Not ripped from struggle, torn from friction. He had been moved. Roland's voice would later describe this as the moment the timeline fractured. Because the river did not kill him. The river merely received him. Rachel scanned the underside of the bridge. Graffiti layered over graffiti. Spray paint overlapping years of territorial signatures. Nothing fresh. Nothing that claimed responsibility. But something else bothered her. There were no shoe impressions consistent with a body being dragged across mud. There were drag marks, but not the kind boots make. She stood slowly. Check upstream access points, she said. And get me traffic cams on both ends of the bridge between midnight and 5. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The victim's fingernails were clean. That detail stayed with her. At 8:26, the coroner's preliminary field estimate narrowed the time of death between midnight and 2. Water saturation suggested he had been in the river less than 4 hours, which meant someone transported him here after he was already dead, which meant someone calculated the river would distort evidence. Rachel stepped away from the body and toward the concrete embankment wall. There were faint parallel streaks in the mud leading toward the waterline. Not from shoes. From something flat, a board.
No.
Too narrow. She looked again. A wheeled object. A cart. The drag marks were not drag marks at all. They were compressed tracks. The body had been rolled. Canvas for commercial vehicles overnight. She instructed. Food service. Maintenance. Anything with small wheels. One officer nodded. Another hesitated. You think someone used a dolly? Rachel didn't answer immediately, because that would imply planning. And planning implied this was not spontaneous violence. By 9:14, a partial identification surfaced. A missing persons report filed at 3:42 in the morning by a roommate. Name, Ethan Vale. Software technician. No known criminal record. No outstanding warrants. Last seen leaving his apartment around 11:48 the previous night. Alone. No sign of forced entry at his residence. Phone last pinged near a warehouse district 2 miles west of the river. Rachel's jaw tightened. Warehouse district. Industrial access roads. Loading docks. Cameras that worked when they wanted to. She stood beneath the bridge one final time before departing. The river swallowed light. The steel overhead amplified sound. The city moved above, unaware of the body below. This was not rage. The impact wound was precise. One decisive blow. No repeated strikes. No chaotic brutality. This was controlled. By 10:02, Rachel was standing in the warehouse district. Rows of brick structures with faded company logos. Metal doors. Loading bays closed for the night. Security cameras angled outward, like silent witnesses. Ethan's phone had last transmitted near Dock 17. There was no blood visible. But there was something else. A faint crescent-shaped scuff near the concrete ramp. Rubber. Small diameter. Rachel crouched again. The mark curved inward, as if something heavy had pivoted. She looked toward the bay door. Closed. Locked. She checked the side alley. Dumpster. Pallets. Old stains. No immediate evidence of struggle. If Ethan died here, it had been cleaned. If he died elsewhere, this was staging. Pull business records for every company operating in this strip, she said. Cross-reference with employees owning utility vans. Roland would later mark this as the second fracture. Because at 11:21, another call came in. Another body. 3 blocks south. Also near water. Also male. Also blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. The second victim had been placed near a drainage culvert, not submerged but positioned carefully on concrete. No wallet. No phone. No shoes. This one was older, mid-30s, wearing a collared shirt and slacks. Rachel did not speak for several seconds after the second scene briefing. 2 bodies. Same method. Same removal of identifiers. Same head trauma. Different disposal points. Close, but not identical. She walked the culvert perimeter herself. There were no wheel marks visible, but there were faint scuffs along the concrete lip, as if something had rested there briefly before being lifted. Lifted. The difference mattered. First victim rolled. Second victim carried. Why the change? Why the inconsistency? Unless there had been an interruption. By noon, confirmation came. The second victim was named Marcus Tilden. Financial consultant. No known connection to Ethan Vale. Different industries. Different neighborhoods. No shared employment. No shared social circles visible at first glance. 2 men with no apparent link, killed within hours of each other, both struck once in the back of the skull. Clean fingernails. No defensive wounds. Which meant they likely did not see it coming. Rachel stood between the culvert shadows and the noon sun. The city buzzed around her. Cars passing. Pedestrians glancing, then looking away. Some killers escalate. Some rehearse. Some refine. This one adjusted within hours, which meant confidence, which meant either experience or compulsion. Check both victims for recent shared transactions, she said. Banking, rideshare, event tickets, anything. Because if they were not connected by relationship, they might be connected by proximity. By early afternoon, preliminary autopsy findings added another layer. The cranial fractures were nearly identical, same force pattern, same angle, weapon likely cylindrical, metal, approximately 1-inch diameter, not random, not improvised. Something selected. Rachel returned briefly to headquarters. Her office walls still held the board from her unresolved case, the one that never aligned, the one that ended with a witness disappearing and a suspect walking free. She did not look at it long, but she looked at it. Because something about this felt familiar, not the method, the precision, the silence, the removal of shoes, that detail. Shoes often carry trace fibers, location markers. Removing them reduced forensic cross-contamination. That was knowledge. Intentional. By 4:38, surveillance review from the warehouse district produced a partial image. One camera, angled poorly, captured a white utility van entering Dock 17 at 1:13 in the morning. No company logo visible. Rear windows tinted. Van exited at 1:26. 13 minutes. Too short for a prolonged struggle, long enough to move a body. But there was no footage placing inside the van, only proximity. Rachel watched the clip twice, then 3 times. The van reversed out smoothly, no hesitation. Whoever drove it was calm and practiced. As evening approached, a third development surfaced. Traffic cam footage near the Eastern Bridge, where Ethan had been found, captured a similar white utility van idling briefly at 3:07 in the morning before pulling away. License plate unreadable. Camera glare. 2 separate locations. Same type of vehicle, different time windows. Possible same offender. Possible coincidence. Rachel did not believe in coincidence. Not when skull fractures matched within millimeters. By dusk, both crime scenes had been processed. Forensics teams found minimal trace evidence. No obvious fingerprints. No tire impressions usable for database matching. Which meant planning again. The city's skyline darkened beyond headquarters windows. Roland would later summarize this opening day in one sentence: 2 men dead. No connection. No witnesses. A van without a name. But Rachel did not summarize. She studied. She requested cross-matching of hardware store purchases involving metal pipes within a 5-mile radius over the last month. She ordered analysis of security footage for anyone removing footwear from the victim's post-mortem. though she suspected that act occurred before disposal. And she returned, briefly, to the river bridge. Night changed the space. The water looked black now, reflective, quiet. She stood alone beneath the steel beams. Listened. Because sometimes the first scene offers something later ones do not. A faint smell lingered that had been masked earlier by morning humidity. Not river, not algae, chemical, industrial cleaner. She stepped closer to the embankment wall. There it was, a pale streak on concrete, subtle, wiped. Someone had rinsed equipment here, not thoroughly, but enough to reduce visible transfer, which meant the river site was not merely disposal, it was secondary cleaning. That implied transport from an initial kill site to staging to disposal, layered movement, calculated sequence, and that required time. Time required privacy. Privacy required access. Warehouses offered that. But why 2 victims in one night? Unless the plan was always 2, or the first attempt revealed a flaw. Rachel looked up at the underside of the bridge once more. Traffic overhead. Life continuing. Somewhere in the city, a van was parked in a driveway or storage unit. Inside it, possibly, traces the killer believed were erased. She exhaled slowly. This was not a frenzy. This was rehearsal evolving into execution. And something about that unsettled her more than chaos ever could. Because chaos makes mistakes. Precision waits. Block 1 ends with 2 confirmed victims, a probable shared vehicle, and a method refined within hours. The question now is not who they were. It is why they were chosen. And whether the pattern has already moved forward. By 8 the next morning, the pattern had not expanded. No third body. No overnight incident matching blunt force trauma. Silence. Sometimes silence is relief. Sometimes it is preparation. Detective Rachel Monroe did not treat it as relief. Both victims, Ethan Vale and Marcus Tilden, were now fully processed through preliminary forensic screening. Toxicology was pending. Autopsy confirmations reinforced what field examiners suspected: each man had been struck once from behind. Force sufficient to fracture the occipital bone. Immediate incapacitation. Rapid death. No hesitation wounds. No defensive bruising, which meant trust or distraction. Rachel stood before the case board in the briefing room. 2 photographs. 2 timelines. 2 maps marked with disposal sites in red. The warehouse district was circled. The river bridge and drainage culvert marked with separate pins. White utility van written in black across the center. "Walk me through overlap," she said. A data analyst began. Both victims lived alone. Both left their residences voluntarily shortly before midnight. Neither showed signs of forced contact. Both phones stopped transmitting within a half-mile radius of Dock 17. The coincidence narrowed. Rachel studied the timestamps. Ethan left at 11:48. Marcus left at 11:53. Different neighborhoods. Different routes. Same general direction. Rideshare records, she asked. Negative. Taxi logs. Nothing matching. Public transit. Closed by that hour. So they drove, or they were picked up. Parking citations and toll readers were queried. At 9:23, the first meaningful convergence surfaced. Both men had received a calendar invitation the previous evening. An event titled Consultation Review. Location field blank. Organizer listed as a generic email address. The email server traced to a public hosting platform. Temporary account. Created less than 24 hours before the murders. Deleted 4 hours after the second body was found. Precision again. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Open metadata, she said. IP trace was partial, but not useless. It originated from a coffee shop Wi-Fi hotspot 3 miles from Dock 17. Surveillance request sent. Rachel's expression did not change, but the rhythm of the case had shifted. This was targeted. The invitations had been accepted by both victims, which meant the sender knew their schedules, knew their email addresses, knew they would respond. Pull employment client lists, Rachel said. Recent consultations, contracts, disputes. By 10:15, a subtle thread appeared. 3 weeks earlier, both Ethan and Marcus had attended the same financial technology networking seminar at a downtown conference center. Different panels. Same event. Attendance list 214 individuals. Not a small pool, but not random. Rachel requested the full list. Names began populating across the board. She circled the event title. If this was selection, the killer's hunting ground might not be streets. It might be professional circles. By noon, toxicology delivered preliminary findings. Both victims had trace amounts of a mild sedative in their bloodstream. Not enough to render unconscious, enough to dull reflexes. Administered likely within 30 minutes before death, which meant ingestion, voluntary, drink, food. Trust again. Rachel exhaled once, so they met someone willingly, shared space, shared something consumable, then turned their backs, or were positioned. The metal pipe theory held. Autopsy measurements suggested a tool approximately 12 to 14 inches long. Portable. Concealable. Rachel walked through Dock 17 personally. Daylight revealed little beyond industrial routine. Forklifts moving pallets. Delivery trucks backing into bays. Security guards with routine boredom. She examined entry logs. One storage unit near Dock 17 had been rented 2 months earlier under limited liability corporation with no employees listed. The business registration address traced to a virtual office. Inside the unit empty. Recently cleaned. Chemical scent faint but detectable. Rachel crouched near the concrete floor. Microscopic flecks remained. Metal residue. Iron. She did not smile. But the alignment tightened. This was a staging site. Not necessarily the kill site, but likely the preparation space. Outside the unit, faint wheel scuffs marked the corridor. Small diameter. Consistent with earlier tracks near the river. Dolly confirmed. She stood. Whoever used this space did so carefully and recently vacated, which suggested awareness of investigation speed. Confidence again, or surveillance. Back at headquarters, the coffee shop footage arrived. Timestamp 8:42 the previous evening. A man seated alone near the rear wall. Baseball cap low. Face partially obscured. Laptop open. Stayed 47 minutes. Paid cash. Left without interacting with staff beyond ordering. Vehicle captured leaving the adjacent parking lot. White utility van. Rear window tint consistent. License plate partially visible. Last 2 characters 7 and K. Rachel replayed the footage frame by frame. The man's build appeared average. Not bulky. Posture upright. Movements efficient. He wiped the table surface before leaving. She paused the video on that frame. Wiped. Preparation extended beyond crime scenes. By mid-afternoon, database search narrowed white utility vans within a 10-mile radius containing 7 and K in the final characters. 4 possible matches. 2 registered to commercial plumbing services. 1 to a catering company. 1 privately owned under a construction subcontractor. Rachel assigned teams to each address. Surveillance first. No direct contact yet. Because premature confrontation could fracture the pattern. At 3:12, something else emerged from the networking seminar list. A third name. Caleb Rourke. Deceased. 6 months earlier. Official ruling accidental fall from a stairwell. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. Rachel went still. Case file pulled. Photographs reviewed. The injury angle matched. Occipital fracture. No defensive wounds. Toxicology at the time inconclusive due to alcohol presence. Ruled accident. But the scene details now felt misaligned. Caleb Rourke had also attended the same seminar, the same one Ethan and Marcus attended. 3 men, same event. 1 dead months ago. 2 dead now. Rachel's gaze shifted toward her unresolved board in her office again. Patterns hide in oversight. If Caleb had been the first rehearsal, disguised as accident, then the killer had refined since. She ordered Caleb's case reopened for comparative forensic review. By late afternoon, surveillance teams reported. Plumbing service 1 van accounted for, driver in documented job sites all night, GPS logs verifiable. Catering company van parked at commissary facility under camera coverage entire window. Construction subcontractor van registered but reported stolen 3 weeks earlier. Police report filed. Insurance claim pending. Rachel's jaw tightened. Stolen vehicles can become invisible tools. She requested recovery report details. Vehicle description matched partial plate. White utility van, no logos. Rear windows tinted. Last seen near an industrial corridor not far from Dock 17. Timeline aligned. By evening, analysts reconstructed possible movement. If the van was stolen weeks earlier and stored somewhere private, it could be deployed without immediate trace. Storage units. Warehouses. Abandoned lots. Rachel returned to Dock 17 at dusk. Lighting changed again. Shadows lengthened between loading bays. She walked the perimeter beyond the vacated storage unit. Behind the building, Beyond a chain link fence sat an unused rail spur, gravel, oil stains, and faint tire tracks leading off toward a service road. She followed the direction on foot. Approximately 200 yards away stood a secondary access lot, rarely used, poorly lit. On the ground, small shards of safety glass, automotive, recent. She crouched, collected a fragment, tempered, likely from a vehicle side window, impact outward, as if broken from inside. She looked toward the road. If the van had been stolen and later broken into, by whom? Thief against thief, or staged vandalism to obscure trace. Her radio crackled. One of the surveillance teams reported unusual activity at a residential garage registered to the construction subcontractor. The homeowner claimed the van had been stolen weeks earlier, yet lights were seen inside the detached garage past midnight. Movement. Rachel redirected immediately. When she arrived, patrol units had positioned discreetly. The garage door was closed, interior light faint beneath the seam. No warrant yet, no confirmed probable cause beyond suspicion. Rachel listened. A low metallic sound inside. Clink, please. Clink, as if something cylindrical struck concrete lightly. She held up a hand. Wait, because timing mattered. If the suspect was inside and unaware of surveillance, patience might reveal more than force. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The garage door lifted abruptly. A man stepped out carrying a trash bag. Mid-30s. Calm. He placed the bag into a curbside bin. Rachel noted his gait. Steady. Unhurried. He glanced once down the street. Casual scan. Then returned inside. The door closed. Rachel signaled for the team to hold. The name registered to the property: Daniel Mercer. Occupation listed as freelance logistics consultant. No prior violent record. No direct connection yet visible to the victims. But logistics consultant. Movement. Planning. Transportation. Rachel watched the garage, because if Mercer was connected to the van, then the pattern had a face. And if the pattern had a face, the silence since the second body might not be rest. It might be reset. Block 2 ends with a reopened past death, a stolen van resurfacing, and a suspect now within sight, but not yet confronted. The pattern is no longer theoretical. It is waiting behind a closed garage door. The warrant was secured at 19 minutes past 9. Probable cause cited correlation between stolen vehicle registration, forensic residue from Dock 17, matching vehicle description captured on surveillance near both disposal sites, and renewed linkage to a prior suspicious death. Daniel Mercer did not know that yet. Detective Rachel Monroe stood across the street, watching the detached garage through the windshield of an unmarked sedan. The neighborhood was quiet. Single-story homes, narrow driveways, porch lights flickering on as evening settled. Mercer's garage light was still on. Inside, shadows moved. Roland would later describe this as the moment the investigation pivoted from theory to confrontation. Rachel stepped out of the vehicle once the entry team was in position. No sirens. No flashing lights. Controlled approach. The garage door was lifted manually by Mercer from the inside just as officers announced presence. His reaction was not explosive. It was measured. He froze, just long enough to calculate. Then he stepped back, hands visible, composed. Rachel watched his eyes. Not wide, not frantic. Assessing. Inside the garage, the white utility van sat angled slightly toward the exit. Rear windows tinted, no company markings. License plate removed. The final 2 characters, 7 and K, visible on a detached plate resting atop a workbench. Rachel stepped forward. Daniel Mercer. Yes! His tone even, neutral. No tremor. We have a warrant to search your property. A slight pause. Then, of course, he did not ask wide-eyed. That detail mattered. Inside the garage, the air carried a faint chemical odor, industrial cleaner, stronger than at the bridge. Rachel's gaze moved slowly across the space. Workbench organized. Tools arranged by size. Metal pipes stacked in a plastic crate. Uniform length approximately 14 inches. One missing from the row. She did not touch anything. Forensics would. But she noted the symmetry. Near the van's rear bumper sat a collapsible dolly. Small wheels. Rubber edges worn. Mud residue caked into treads. Rachel crouched without breaking eye contact with Mercer. Been doing renovation work? She asked casually. Storage hauling, he replied. Occasional contract deliveries, even overnight. Sometimes. His breathing remained steady. Rachel opened the rear van doors. Interior recently wiped. Too clean, but not perfect. Under the rubber matting, faint discoloration. Iron trace visible even before luminal application. Mercer shifted his weight slightly. Subtle. Right foot backward. Distance increasing by inches. Rachel noticed. Stay where you are. An officer instructed. Mercer complied. Still calm. Inside the house, officers conducted a parallel search. On the kitchen counter, 2 unopened bottles of sparkling water. Same brand found in both victims' trash bins during apartment canvassing. Not definitive. But alignment continued. In Mercer's office, a laptop, encrypted. But forensic imaging began immediately. Rachel returned to the garage. She stood facing Mercer now. Do you know Ethan Vale? No. Marcus Tilden? No. Caleb Rook? A fractional pause. Less than a second. But real? No. Rachel let silence expand. Because silence reveals discomfort faster than accusation. Mercer held her gaze. But his jaw tightened. Microscopically. Why? He asked finally. Routine questions. Rachel replied. The trash bag he had discarded earlier was retrieved. Inside, disposable gloves, paper towels, a torn strip of fabric consistent with a jacket lining, and a receipt from a hardware store dated 3 days prior. Purchasee galvanized steel pipe. Rachel held the receipt between 2 gloved fingers. Mercer exhaled once through his nose. Still not panicked. Plumbing repair, he said. On a vehicle without plates. Rachel asked. Silence again. Forensics technicians illuminated the van interior. Luminol revealed faint splatter patterns along the lower side panel. Wiped, but not erased. Impact spatter consistent with blunt force trauma. Rachel felt the shift internally. Theory had become structure. But motive remained absent. Mercer was read his rights. He did not resist. He did not protest. He did not ask for explanation. He requested an attorney. Standard. Expected. As he was escorted to a patrol vehicle, he glanced once at the van, not at Rachel, at the van, attachment, investment. Inside the garage, further processing revealed additional detail. In a corner storage cabinet, 3 pairs of men's shoes, different sizes, recently cleaned. Soles scrubbed. Rachel stood before them without expression. Why keep them? Trophy. Control, or misdirection. Each pair would be matched to victims. If confirmed, escalation would be undeniable. Back at headquarters, interrogation protocol began once counsel arrived. Mercer sat upright in the interview room, hands folded. Attorney beside him. Rachel observed from behind one-way glass initially. He displayed no visible signs of agitation, no trembling fingers, no restless movement. This was not impulsive violence. This was controlled. The forensic team returned preliminary results within 2 hours. Trace blood from the van matched Ethan Vale. Metal residue from Dock 17 storage unit matched the same composition as pipes in Mercer's garage. Shoe sizes corresponded to Ethan and Marcus. Caleb Rourke's archived evidence was being reprocessed for comparison. Rachel entered the interview room. Mercer's eyes followed her. Steady. You rented a storage unit near Dock 17, she said. Nope. We have video. Silence. You sent consultation invitations from a coffee shop Wi-Fi. Well, no response. You transported 2 deceased men in a stolen van. His attorney interjected. My client denies all allegations. Rachel placed photographs on the table. Ethan. Marcus. Then Caleb. Mercer's eyes flicked to Caleb's photo again, longer than the others. There. That was the thread. Caleb Rourke's death was ruled accidental. Rachel said evenly. We're reopening it. Mercer's jaw flexed. Not anger. Recognition. Accidents happen, his attorney said. Rachel leaned slightly forward. They do. She agreed. And sometimes they're engineered. Silence filled the room. Mercer did not look away from Caleb's photo. Rachel observed carefully. Because motive does not live in evidence alone. It lives in reaction. 3 men, she continued. Same professional event, same type of injury, same chemical sedation. Mercer finally spoke, softly. You're assuming a pattern. Rachel held his gaze. Are we wrong? Another pause. Longer this time. The attorney touched Mercer's sleeve lightly. A silent warning. Mercer inhaled, then exhaled. No comment. Rachel stepped back. Sometimes refusal confirms more than confession. Outside the room, new forensic data arrived. Fingerprint partial recovered from inside the van door handle. Matched Mercer. Not unexpected, but reinforcent. More importantly, trace fibers under Ethan's fingernails. Blue synthetic blend. Consistent with industrial moving blankets. A stack of such blankets sat folded neatly in Mercer's garage. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. Not fatigue, alignment. This was tightening. But motive remained the missing piece. Why these men? Why that seminar? Financial technology networking event. She pulled the seminar agenda again. Panel topics. Investors. Startup founders. Consultants. Among the speaker list, one name circled in red from a prior investigation years ago. A venture capital firm once investigated in connection with financial fraud allegations. Case collapsed due to insufficient evidence. Rachel remembered that board. The unresolved one. The witness who disappeared. The firm's junior analyst at the time, Caleb Rook. Rachel's pulse slowed deliberately. If Mercer targeted individuals connected to that event, all as he avenging something, or silencing something, she reopened Caleb's financial history. 6 months before his death, Caleb had filed an internal complaint against that same venture firm. Complaint sealed after his accident. Ethan and Marcus had both consulted for companies, partially funded by that firm. Rachel felt the ground shift. This might not be random selection. This might be a list. Mercer sat silently in the interview room, but the pattern was expanding beyond him. If he acted alone, motive would center on grievance. If he acted for someone else, then Mercer was logistics, not architect. Block 3 ends with physical evidence mounting, Mercer in custody, and the possibility that the murders are tied to an older financial controversy, one that intersects uncomfortably with Rachel's own unresolved past investigation. The case is no longer just about who killed 2 men. It is about what they knew. By midnight, Daniel Mercer had still not spoken beyond procedural responses. Request for counsel. Denial of direct involvement. No comment on specific allegations. Calm. Too calm for someone facing 2 counts of homicide and the reopening of a prior suspicious death. Detective Rachel Monroe did not press further that night, because pressure applied too early fractures information. Instead, she shifted focus to motive. The venture capital firm resurfacing in connection with Caleb Rook's archived complaint was named Aldercrest Holdings. 5 years ago, Rachel had been peripherally assigned to an inquiry involving Aldercrest, allegations of financial manipulation tied to inflated startup valuations. The case stalled when a junior analyst who had agreed to cooperate withdrew suddenly. That analyst had been Caleb Rook. 6 months after withdrawing, he died from what was ruled a stairwell accident. Now 2 additional men, both professionally adjacent to companies funded by Aldercrest, were dead. Rachel stood in her office, lights dimmed, case files open across her desk. She pulled Caleb's old complaint transcript. Highlighted section. Internal projections falsified to secure secondary investor rounds. Below that, Caleb had listed 3 external consultants who might corroborate discrepancies. 2 names were redacted in the original public file, now unredacted under reopened authority. Ethan Vale, Marcus Tilden. Rachel went still. Not coincidence. Not random selection. Not escalation. Systematic elimination. If Mercer was responsible for the physical acts, the selection list predated him. She returned to the interview room. Mercer remained upright in the chair, attorney beside him. She placed the unredacted document on the table. You knew Caleb Rourke, she said evenly. Silence. You knew Ethan Vale and Marcus Tilden had professional overlap with Aldercrest. No visible reaction. But Mercer's breathing changed. Subtle, slower. You attended the same seminar. I attend many seminars. Mercer replied calmly. Rachel nodded once. And yet the only 3 individuals from that event who filed financial discrepancy reports are now dead. The attorney leaned forward. Detective, this line of insinuation. Rachel did not raise her voice. It's a question. Mercer looked at the document again. His composure held, but something beneath it tightened. People make allegations all the time, he said. Doesn't make them true. Did you believe Caleb? Rachel asked. That question landed differently. Not accusatory. Personal. A pause. Then, no comment. Rachel studied him carefully. Mercer did not present as ideologically driven. Not enraged. Not chaotic. Structured. Methodical. Logistics consultant. Transportation. Movement. The one who executes plans, not necessarily conceives them. She shifted tactics. Who approached you? No response. You didn't randomly pick 3 financial professionals from a conference list. Silence. Rachel leaned back slightly. Or maybe you did. The attorney interjected again. My client is done for tonight. Rachel stood. Then we'll continue tomorrow. Be outside the room. New forensic confirmation arrived. Metal trace from Caleb Rourke's archived autopsy samples matched the same alloy composition as the galvanized pipes recovered from Mercer's garage. The earlier death was no longer an accident. It was the prototype. Rachel closed the file slowly. 3 murders over 6 months. Same method, same targeted demographic, which meant planning long-term, not emotional reaction, not spontaneous retaliation. She ordered a full financial audit on Mercer. If he acted alone, there would be a catalyst, debt, dispute, personal loss. If he acted on behalf of someone, there would be money. By 2 a.m, the first irregularity surfaced. Large deposits. Structured. Layered through shell accounts. Transferred over 4 months. Origin, a consulting retainer from a subsidiary firm indirectly owned by Aldercrest Holdings. Rachel's jaw set. Payment pattern aligned with the timeline. First deposit 2 weeks before Caleb's death. Second series before Ethan and Marcus were killed. Not coincidence. Contract killing disguised as independent consulting. Mercer was logistics. Aldercrest was motive. But proof required more than financial correlation. By dawn, a warrant request for Aldercrest Executive Communications was drafted. Rachel knew this territory. Years ago, insufficient evidence had halted momentum. Witness withdrawn. Paper trail fragmented. Now 3 men were dead, and the same firm sat in the background again. At 9:15, Mercer requested to speak without his attorney present. Unprompted, Rachel entered cautiously. Counsel waved. She confirmed. He nodded. Recorded. Time stamped. You're not wrong about Aldercrest, Mercer said quietly. First voluntary statement. Rachel did not interrupt. They ruin people, he continued. Financially, professionally, legally. They bury complaints. And you decided to what? She asked. Correct it. His tone did not carry anger, only justification. They paid you, Rachel said. A faint smile. Not to kill. To what? To ensure silence. There it was, clarification. They gave you names, she said. No. Pause. They gave me access. Access to internal communications, to complaint filings, to redacted records. Rachel held steady. Access to what? A Mercer looked down briefly at his hands. Data sets, he said. Lists of risk, not victims. Risk. Individuals who had raised internal red flags. Potential whistleblowers. External consultants with knowledge of projection manipulation. They didn't tell you to kill them, Rachel said. No. But you interpreted silence as permanent solution. He did not answer directly. Caleb was the first, Mercer said finally. He was weak. Back down. Still a liability. You pushed him, Rachel said. Stairwells are slippery. No remorse. No triumph. Just statement. And the others? Necessary. Rachel watched him carefully. Necessary for who? Mercer's eyes met hers. For stability. Stability of financial empire. Investor confidence. Market perception. He believed he was preserving order. You're not an employee of Aldercrest, Rachel said. No. Then why? Silence stretched, longer than before. Then he said quietly, my father invested everything in a startup they funded. When projections collapsed, he lost everything. They blamed market fluctuation. Rachel did not move. He killed himself. Mercer continued. But the projections were falsified long before. So you infiltrated them? Yes. Earned trust? Yes. And eliminated perceived threats to their narrative. Another pause. They didn't ask for that, he said. But they benefited. He did not deny. Rachel felt the familiar cold alignment settle in. Years ago, her unresolved case had centered on Aldercrest's suppressed complaint system. She had suspected internal enforcement mechanisms. Not corporate memos, human ones. Now she had one sitting across from her. You understand, she said evenly. That killing whistleblowers preserves fraud. It doesn't correct it. Mercer's expression did not shift. Markets require confidence. And murder builds that. Silence. He had constructed a moral architecture in which violence equaled stabilization. Controlled, calculated, justified. Rachel ended the interview. Outside, she authorized immediate seizure of Aldercrest executive servers. If Mercer acted independently, Aldercrest would distance themselves. If communications revealed awareness, conspiracy charges would follow. Block 4 ends with confession of method, but not full conspiracy proof. Mercer admits to killing Caleb, Ethan, and Marcus, framed as eliminating risk. The financial firm resurfaces at the center of motive. Rachel now stands at the intersection of homicide investigation and corporate corruption, territory she has walked before. And this time, she has blood tying it together. By 11 that morning, Aldercrest Holdings released a statement. They expressed shock and sorrow at the tragic deaths of 3 professionals who had, at various times, engaged with companies in their investment portfolio. They denied any knowledge of Daniel Mercer. They denied any contractual relationship. They denied any involvement. The language was polished, immediate, prepared. Detective Rachel Monroe read the statement twice before looking up at the digital warrant return notifications populating her screen. Server imaging had begun. Corporate counsel from Aldercrest was already filing motions to limit scope. Rachel had expected resistance. What she did not expect was how quickly the firm attempted to distance itself from Mercer. Because Mercer had not claimed employment. He had claimed access. There was a difference. Inside the interrogation room, Mercer waited without agitation. He had confessed to the physical acts. He had described them as necessary corrections. He had not provided direct evidence of instruction, which meant the next phase of the investigation would not be about brutality. It would be about infrastructure. Rachel assembled a financial crimes liaison team before noon. Forensic accounting first, she said. Trace every consulting payment to Mercer over the past year. I want originating accounts, routing shells, beneficiary links. If Aldercrest used subsidiaries to insulate liability, the path would not be direct. But money rarely disappears without trace. By early afternoon, the first layer peeled back. The consulting retainer Mercer received originated from a firm called Harlow Strategic Advisory. Registered address, same virtual office as the storage unit LLC Mercer had used near Dock 17. Rachel's expression did not change. Harlow Strategic had one listed executive, named Thomas Wexler. Chief Risk Officer, Aldercrest Holdings. Risk. The word Mercer had used. Rachel felt the alignment settle into place. She reopened Mercer's statement transcript. They gave me access. Access to what? If Wexler provided internal risk assessment reports listing potential whistleblowers, Mercer would not need explicit instruction. He would need only belief. Rachel requested immediate subpoena of Harlow Strategic's internal communications. At 2:16, a breakthrough surfaced from digital forensics on Mercer's laptop. Encrypted folders decrypted. Inside spreadsheets. Columns labeled exposure index. Names listed with numerical risk ratings. Caleb Rourke, high. Ethan Vale, moderate. Marcus Tilden, moderate. 3 names crossed out digitally following their dates of death. Below them, 5 additional names, not crossed out. Rachel's pulse slowed deliberately. The pattern had not stopped. It had paused. She called an emergency meeting. Protective notification for these 5 individuals immediately. She ordered. Discreet. Do not disclose full context. Because panic could scatter evidence, but delay could cost lives. By 3:45, one of the listed names, Aisha Nair, financial auditor, reported receiving an email 2 days earlier requesting a late-night consultation review. Identical subject line. She declined due to travel. Rachel's jaw tightened. The list was active. Mercer had been interrupted after the second body. Not finished. She returned to the interrogation room. You had 5 more, she said evenly, placing the spreadsheet printout on the table. Mercer did not appear surprised. They were still evaluating, he said. Evaluating what? Exposure. Exposure to what? Destabilization. Rachel leaned forward slightly. Thomas Wexler. A flicker. Small, but real. He authorized the data, Mercer said carefully. He didn't authorize me. That's not what I asked. Silence. Ascent risk briefings quarterly. Mercer continued. Flagged individuals creating compliance pressure. And you interpreted that as elimination criteria. A Mercer met her gaze. You think corporations don't solve problems quietly. I think you killed 3 men, she replied evenly. His breathing remained steady, but the ideological armor was cracking. Wexler knew what would happen, Mercer said finally. He knew you would kill them. He knew they wouldn't be a problem anymore. Rachel held that sentence carefully, because it was not direct admission of conspiracy, but it was awareness. Awareness plus payment equals liability. She exited immediately and relayed the update to the legal team. Warrant expansion authorized. Thomas Wexler was now under formal investigation. By early evening, Aldercrest's internal emails began populating secure evidence servers. Keyword searches flagged repeated references to mitigation, containment, and external stabilization. One email from Wexler to an internal compliance officer stood out, flagging Rourke as ongoing reputational risk. Ensure corrective action. Corrective action. Ambiguous. Deliberate. Rachel requested context threads. Follow-up messages revealed Rourke's internal complaint had been categorized as low probability but high impact. Recommendation, monitor, and mitigate. 6 weeks later, Rourke was dead. The phrase reappeared in a separate thread referencing Vale and Tilden. Secondary exposure vectors require proactive mitigation. The language was surgical, nonviolent, corporate, but when placed beside Mercer's timeline, the meaning shifted. Mitigation had not been legal rebuttal. It had been physical removal. By 7 that night, a warrant was issued for Thomas Wexler's arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit homicide, pending full evidentiary review. Rachel did not celebrate. She prepared, because executives do not react quietly when handcuffed. At 8:43, agents entered Wexler's penthouse office. He did not resist. He appeared confused, indignant. What is this about? He demanded. Rachel arrived 20 minutes later. Wexler sat in an interview room now. Polished suit. Perfect composure. You can't possibly believe I ordered murders, he said. I believe you flagged individuals as threats. Rachel replied, that's corporate compliance language. And you paid Daniel Mercer through Harlow Strategic. That was data consultancy. Risk scoring. Less. And when those individuals died? Wexler paused. We were unaware of any connection. Rachel slid the spreadsheet across the table. 5 more names, she said quietly. Wexler looked at it. Color drained slightly, small, but visible. You're stretching correlation, he said. Am I? She asked. You think we would jeopardize billions in assets over 3 consultants? I think you believed someone else would solve the problem discreetly. Silence. Wexler leaned back. You don't understand how market panic works, he said. Explain it. If internal projections are questioned publicly, investor flight begins. Collapse accelerates. Thousands lose jobs. And your solution? Rachel asked. Internal containment. By any means necessary. He did not answer directly. But he did not deny knowledge of Mercer's methods either. By midnight, the legal threshold had been met. Wexler was formally charged. The 5 remaining names on Mercer's list were placed under protective watch. Caleb Rourke's death was reclassified as homicide. 3 murders now formally linked. Conspiracy expanding upward. Rachel returned to her office after the arrests. She looked at the unresolved board from years earlier. The one where Aldercrest had slipped through procedural gaps. Not this time. Because this time the pattern had left bodies. Block 5 ends with the conspiracy surfacing beyond a lone killer. Mercer executed. Wexler enabled. Aldercrest insulated. 5 additional lives narrowly protected. The case is no longer about stopping a serial pattern. It is about dismantling a system that converted financial risk into human targets. By morning, the narrative had shifted from homicide investigation to financial conspiracy. News outlets reported the arrest of Thomas Wexler before sunrise. Aldercrest Holdings suspended him publicly within hours. The firm framed the situation as an alleged rogue consultant acting beyond the scope of any corporate directive. Detective Rachel Monroe had expected that response. Corporate structures survive by isolating liability. Daniel Mercer was the blade. Thomas Wexler was the hand. But institutions rarely admit to owning either. Rachel convened a joint task force briefing at 8:30. Forensics has us on 3 confirmed homicides, she said. Financial trails connect Mercer to Harlow Strategic and Harlow to Wexler. What we do not yet have is direct proof that Aldercrest as an institution authorized lethal action. The distinction mattered legally. Without it, Wexler could claim independent overreach. Mercer could claim ideological misinterpretation. And Aldercrest could rebuild around them. Rachel reviewed the newly extracted email archives. One thread drew attention. Subject line, Q3 Exposure Review. Attached Document Risk Mitigation Roadmap. Within the document, under a section labeled Escalation Tier, there were coded annotations. Tier 1 Rebuttal. Tier 2 Legal Containment. Tier 3 External Stabilization. The phrase appeared again. External Stabilization. Rachel requested metadata. The document had been modified 3 days before Caleb Rourke's death. Author Thomas Wexler. Shared with limited internal recipients. But one external forwarding stood out. An encrypted transfer sent to a non-corporate address. Digital forensics traced it to a secure cloud account registered under Daniel Mercer. There was no explicit instruction reading, kill. There never would be. Instead, there was alignment. Language designed to remain deniable. Rachel returned to Mercer. He appeared unchanged, still upright, still composed. Tier 3, she said, placing the printed roadmap on the table. Mercer glanced at it. That's their language, he said. You operationalized it. I interpreted it. A's elimination. A's stabilization. Rachel did not argue semantics. Did Wexler ever tell you to stop? She asked. No. Did he question the outcomes? No. One Caleb died. Internal chatter decreased, Mercer said calmly. After Ethan and Marcus. Exposure ratings were updated to 0. Rachel studied him, so he knew. Mercer did not speak. But silence can affirm as strongly as confession. Outside the interrogation room, protective teams reported an attempted contact incident. One of the 5 remaining names, Aisha Nair, had been approached that morning by an unknown male claiming to be a compliance auditor requesting a document review. The individual fled when asked for identification. Rachel's pulse shifted. Mercer is in custody, she said, which meant someone else was acting. Copycat, independent contractor, or another internal consultant. She ordered immediate review of Harlow's strategic subcontractor agreements. Within hours, a second consultant name appeared, Liam Kessler, listed as data logistics analyst, paid irregularly, short-term contracts, discontinued 2 weeks prior. Rachel felt the pattern widen. Mercer may not have been the only executor. She pulled Kessler's file, former military logistics, no criminal record. Specialized in operational planning. Last known address, vacant rental property. Abandoned. Neighbors reported a white sedan parked intermittently at night over the past month. Rachel dispatched units immediately. Inside the rental property, officers discovered printed copies of the same exposure index spreadsheet Mercer possessed. But this version included timestamps more recent than Mercer's last login. Someone had updated it after Mercer's arrest. Rachel's jaw tightened. That meant either 1. Mercer shared access credentials. 2. Harlow Strategic maintained parallel operators. 3. Wexler was not the highest authority involved. The protective list now had 4 names remaining unapproached. The window was narrowing. Rachel stood in the empty rental property's living room. Dust on the floor. Bare walls. Single folding table. On that table a city map with 5 addresses circled. The remaining names. Aisha Nair's address marked with an X. Crossed out. Not deceased, but targeted. The next circled name was highlighted in red. Jonathan Hale. Forensic accountant. Scheduled to testify in a regulatory inquiry in 2 weeks. Rachel did not hesitate. She contacted Hale directly. Discreet relocation arranged. Unmarked transport. Because this was no longer retrospective investigation. This was active threat mitigation. Back at headquarters, Wexler requested to speak again, without counsel. Rachel entered cautiously. You think Mercer acted alone? He asked. I think you underestimated the consequences of coded language, she replied. Wexler leaned forward. You don't understand scale, he said. Explain it? There are tiers beyond me, he said quietly. Rachel remained still. Board oversight committees. He continued. Investor steering groups. They expect risk to be managed. If compliance flags escalate without containment, executive positions are replaced. Are you saying you were pressured? I'm saying expectations are clear. Clear enough to justify murder? I never authorized that. But you anticipated results, Rachel said. Silence. He did not deny anticipation, which meant awareness of Mercer's methodology at minimum. Rachel pressed further. Who else received Tier 3 briefings? Wexler hesitated, then provided 3 names. Board members. Not operational executives. Strategic oversight. The investigation widened again. Search warrants extended. But Rachel's focus remained immediate, because somewhere Liam Kessler was free. And if Kessler interpreted Tier 3 as Mercer had, then the list would not remain theoretical. By late evening, surveillance near Jonathan Hale's temporary safe location detected a white sedan circling the block twice. License plate partially obscured. Units intercepted. Driver fled on foot. Abandoned vehicle contained galvanized steel pipe. Disposable gloves. Sedative tablets. The pattern repeated, but this time interrupted before execution. Fingerprint analysis on the sedan steering wheel returned a match. Liam Kessler. Rachel exhaled once. There it was. Mercer had not acted in isolation. He had normalized the method. Kessler had prepared to continue it. Mercer's ideology had metastasized into operational structure. Rachel stood over the intercepted evidence. 3 confirmed dead. 1 attempted prevented. 4 additional names still potential targets. Aldercrest's public denials now rang hollow against physical proof of organized stabilization. A Block 6 ends with a second operative identified, an attempted 4th murder prevented, and the realization that the conspiracy may extend beyond one executive. The system did not rely on a single blade. It had redundancy, and Rachel now had to sever every one of them before the list advanced again. Liam Kessler was taken into custody at 22 minutes past midnight. He did not run far. 2 blocks from the intercepted sedan, he attempted to scale a chain link fence behind a closed auto repair shop. Patrol units closed in before he cleared the top. Unlike Daniel Mercer, Kessler did not project composure. His breathing was elevated, his movements sharp, eyes scanning constantly. He understood interruption. Inside the abandoned sedan, the evidence was clear. Galvanized steel pipe, sedative tablets, printed profile on Jonathan Hale, disposable gloves, a handwritten checklist, approach, engage, confirm ingestion, stabilize. Rachel studied the checklist without visible reaction. The language mirrored Mercer's phrasing. Stabilize, not kill. Sanitize vocabulary reduces moral friction. In the interrogation room, Kessler requested counsel immediately. No voluntary statement. No ideological justification. But digital extraction from his phone began within the hour. Encrypted messaging app. Recent activity. Last message received 8 hours before arrest. Tier 3 unresolved. Address remaining exposures. Sender anonymized. But server trace matched a corporate VPN endpoint linked to Aldercrest's internal network. Rachel felt the final piece shifting into place. Wexler had claimed there were tiers beyond him. Now the directive language appeared again, after his arrest, which meant someone else had access to risk briefings, or someone higher was continuing them. At 3:15 in the morning, forensic accounting confirmed that Kessler had received payments from Harlow Strategic in smaller, staggered increments. Consulting classification operational support. Timeline overlapped Mercer's activity. Parallel structure. Redundancy. Rachel re-entered Wexler's interview room. He appeared more fatigued now. Not defeated, but calculating. Kessler was activated after Mercer, she said. Wexler's gaze shifted slightly. I don't know a Kessler, he replied. Rachel placed the intercepted message transcript on the table. Tier 3 unresolved. She read aloud. Address remaining exposures. Wexler did not touch the paper. That phrasing exists across dozens of compliance documents, he said. Not with timestamps after your arrest. Rachel replied. That landed. His composure thinned. Board communication continues without me, he said finally. Who has authority to issue tier classifications? Risk Committee. Names. He hesitated. Because this line moved beyond damage control, it moved into structural exposure. Rachel waited. Silence often extracts more than pressure. Finally, he spoke 3 names. 2 board members, 1 senior investor liaison, high profile, politically connected, financially powerful. Rachel did not react externally, but internally she recalibrated. This was no longer an executive shielding profit margins. This was institutional self-preservation. She exited and initiated emergency warrants before sunrise, because delay would trigger asset movement, data deletion, legal barricades. At 7:40, agents executed simultaneous searches at 3 residential properties. Corporate servers locked remotely, phones seized, encrypted drives imaged. Media began gathering outside Aldercrest headquarters by mid-morning. Speculation accelerated. Rachel remained inside Operations Command. Focus narrowed. Kessler's interrogation resumed once counsel present. Unlike Mercer, Kessler did not rationalize. He described assignments as tasks. You received names. Rachel asked.
Yes.
From who? Encrypted channel? Did you know Mercer?
Yes.
Did you coordinate? Only through data sync. Data sync, meaning shared exposure index updates, meaning Mercer and Kessler operated on the same evolving list. Did you know Caleb Rourke? Rachel asked. No. But you knew Vale and Tilden. They were flagged. Flagged for what? Escalation risk. Rachel observed his posture. Less ideological. More procedural. You believed elimination would stabilize markets. He shrugged faintly. I believed my contract required resolution. There it was. Detachment. Mercer believed in correction. Kessler believed in completion. Rachel left the room with clarity. 2 operators. 1 architect in custody. 3 higher authorities under investigation. But proof required documented awareness of lethal outcomes. By midday, digital forensic teams uncovered archived internal chat logs between Wexler and 1 board member, dated 2 days after Caleb Rourke's death. Message from board member. Rourke issue resolved. Wexler responded. External stabilization successful. Exposure index reduced. Rachel read it twice. No ambiguity. No misunderstanding. Resolved. Successful. Reduced. Language cold enough to distance itself from blood. But proximity undeniable. She forwarded the log to the district attorney. Conspiracy threshold crossed. Arrest warrants authorized immediately. By late afternoon, all 3 board-level individuals were in custody. Public statements shifted from denial to limited awareness of consultant misconduct. Rachel knew better. Because awareness plus relief equals complicity. Meanwhile, protective details reported no further contact attempts on the remaining 4 names. With Kessler apprehended and the directive channel severed, the operational threat window narrowed. But Rachel did not reduce security. Not yet. She returned to the river bridge at dusk, the place where the first body had been staged. Traffic moved overhead as it had before, indifferent. 3 men dead. 1 nearly. 5 targeted. All because a financial risk matrix reclassified human beings as liabilities. Rachel stood in silence. Years earlier, Aldercrest had slipped through procedural cracks. A witness withdrew. Evidence diluted. Case dissolved. This time, the pattern had escalated into homicide. And escalation leaves forensic gravity. Roland would later describe this phase as the unraveling. But unraveling is too gentle a word. This was structural collapse. Because when corporations outsource silence to violence, the paper trail eventually stains. Block 7 ends with the conspiracy exposed beyond operational contractors, board-level communications recovered, and the systemic language of stabilization, legally reframed as coordinated homicide. The immediate threat has been intercepted, but the full reckoning is only beginning. Indictments were filed 48 hours later. Conspiracy to commit murder, 3 counts of first-degree homicide, attempted homicide, obstruction of justice, racketeering. The language was no longer corporate. It was criminal. Daniel Mercer, Liam Kessler, Thomas Wexler, 3 board-level members of Aldercrest Holdings, 6 defendants, 3 confirmed dead, 4 additional intended targets placed under protection. Detective Rachel Monroe did not attend the press briefing. She remained inside the operations room, reviewing timeline reconstruction, because public exposure does not equal structural understanding, and she needed to understand how a compliance framework evolved into a kill list. Digital forensic teams finished mapping the exposure index architecture. It began as a standard internal risk assessment tool, columns tracking regulatory vulnerability, columns tracking investor sensitivity, columns tracking media exposure probability. But 6 months before Caleb Rook's death, a new column had been added. Escalation tier, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, originally defined in policy as legal response stages, but internal chats revealed a parallel interpretation. Tier 3 meant off, books resolution. The phrase appeared repeatedly in encrypted threads between Wexler and one board member. No explicit word for violence. No written directive reading eliminate. Instead, injure durability. Close loop. Zero index. Mercer and Kessler operationalized those phrases, and Aldercrest leadership accepted the outcomes. Rachel traced the first insertion of Tier 3 language. It aligned precisely with an investor panic meeting following declining valuation projections. In that meeting, one board member had written, "If we cannot neutralize exposure vectors, the market will do it for us." Neutralize. Vectors. The vocabulary of strategy repurposed for people. Rachel leaned back in her chair. 3 men killed not because they were enemies, but because they were inconvenient. Mercer's father's suicide had been the emotional catalyst, but Mercer's access and structure came from Aldercrest's tolerance for ambiguous solutions. He had believed he was correcting corruption. The board had believed they were managing risk. Kessler had believed he was fulfilling a contract. Layered rationalization. Layered detachment. By midweek, plea negotiations began. Kessler's attorney approached first. Offer. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentence. Rachel approved conditional proffer. Inside the debriefing room, Kessler spoke clinically. Mercer handled first 2 Tier 3 actions. He said, "I was backup." "Backup for what?" Rachel asked. "In case he failed." "Failed how?" "Detection. Hesitation. Moral drift." Rachel studied him. "You evaluated Mercer?" "Yes." "Based on what?" "Response time. Cleanup efficiency. Emotional variance." The language remained procedural. When Wexler was arrested, Rachel asked, "Signal issued to accelerate remaining exposures." "Who?" "By who?" "Risk Committee channel." "Specific name?" Kessler provided one. An investor liaison who had not yet been directly tied to operational communication. Digital confirmation followed within hours. Encrypted message from that liaison to Wexler the night of Mercer's arrest. Proceed with continuity. Cannot allow exposure rebound. Continuity, meaning continue. Rachel forwarded the message to prosecutors immediately. That liaison was arrested before nightfall. The conspiracy circle tightened further. Meanwhile, Mercer remained silent since his initial admissions. Rachel requested one final interview. He agreed. No attorney present. 3 men are dead, she said calmly. "Yes." "You said you were correcting instability." "Yes." "Did you know Kessler was assigned as backup?" A slight pause. "No." "You were replaceable." That landed. Not emotionally explosive, but perceptible. "They believed in redundancy." Mercer said quietly, "You believed in justice." "I believed in equilibrium." Rachel studied him. Equilibrium for who? He did not answer, because the answer would expose the flaw in his moral framework. Equilibrium for investors. For market confidence, not for the men who died. Rachel shifted. "Your father," she said. His jaw tightened slightly. "They falsified projections," he said. "He trusted them?" "It killing consultants fixed that. It prevented more collapse." "Or prevented exposure," she replied. Silence. Mercer's certainty had thinned. Not shattered, but cracked. "You were a tool," Rachel said evenly. "I chose," he replied. "Yes," she agreed. "But they built the language that made it feel necessary." That sentence lingered. Because ideology thrives in ambiguity. Mercer had acted. But the board had normalized abstraction. Rachel left the room knowing the legal structure was solid. Digital logs. Financial trails. Parallel operators. Language alignment. The prosecution would not hinge on one confession. It would hinge on systemic design. By Friday, protective status for the remaining 4 names was gradually reduced. Threat level dropped to monitored rather than immediate. No additional movement detected. The kill list was neutralized. But Rachel did not feel closure, because 3 men were dead, and Caleb Rourke's case file still sat open on her desk. She reopened it that night. Photographs. Autopsy. Stairwell angle. It had been labeled accident. Closed quietly. No press. No public scrutiny. She thought about her earlier investigation into Aldercrest years ago. How the complaint had evaporated. How Caleb withdrew cooperation days before his death. Now she knew why. He had been reclassified. Exposure index. Tier 3. The phrase echoed. Roland would later describe this case as one where language killed before violence did. Because when human beings become entries in a spreadsheet, elimination becomes a metric. Rachel stood once more beneath the eastern bridge at night. The river moved as it had on day one. Indifferent. But the structure above it, corporate, financial, institutional, was no longer intact. Block 8 ends with cooperation from a secondary operator, expanded conspiracy charges reaching investor level, and the systemic mechanism of Tier 3, legally dismantled. The immediate threat is over. The legal reckoning has begun, but the cost has already been paid in blood. The first plea agreement was finalized 3 weeks. Later, Liam Kessler accepted reduced sentencing in exchange for full testimony detailing the operational structure of Tier 3, stabilizations. His statements corroborated digital evidence. He described payment routing, data sync protocols, risk briefings, redundancy planning. He described murder as workflow. Daniel Mercer did not accept a deal. He insisted on trial, not out of denial, out of conviction. Thomas Wexler and the remaining board members entered not guilty pleas, framing all communications as abstract compliance language misinterpreted by rogue contractors. The legal battlefield shifted from physical evidence to semantics. Detective Rachel Monroe prepared for testimony with the same precision she had brought to the riverbank. Because juries understand blood, they struggle with coded spreadsheets. The prosecution built its case chronologically. Caleb Rourke's complaint. Insertion of escalation tier column. First, external stabilization. Notation. Caleb's death. Subsequent risk updates. Payments to Mercer. Second and third deaths. Activation of Kessler. Attempted fourth. The sequence told a story that corporate counsel could not fully fracture. Rachel took the stand on the fourth day of trial. She did not dramatize. She reconstructed. The term Tier 3 appears first in internal documentation, 6 months before Mr. Rourke's death. She said evenly. She walked the jury through language evolution. Mitigate, contain, stabilize, zero index. Then she showed the spreadsheet with names crossed out after dates of death. The courtroom air shifted. Defense counsel attempted to isolate Mercer. Detective? One attorney began. Who'sn't it true, Mr. Mercer never received a written instruction to kill anyone. Yes, Rachel replied calmly. And isn't it true the phrase external stabilization could refer to lawful public relations mitigation? It could, she agreed, and you're interpreting it as lethal directive. I'm interpreting it in context of 3 dead men and corresponding payment timelines, she said. Silence followed. Because context closes escape routes. Kessler testified next, his voice flat. He described intercepting risk briefings, described Mercer's first 2 actions, described receiving message to accelerate unresolved exposures. After Mercer's arrest, he read the message aloud. Proceed with continuity. Defense objected repeatedly, but the digital timestamps aligned too precisely with attempted contact on Aisha Nair and the intercepted attempt on Jonathan Hale. The pattern was temporal, not interpretive. Mercer testified in his own defense. Unexpected. He sat upright, hands folded. He did not deny the killings. I eliminated systemic risk, he said. For whom? The prosecutor asked. For stability. Whose stability? Market stability. And who benefits from that? Everyone. The courtroom murmured faintly. Rachel watched him carefully. His ideological certainty remained intact. He had built a moral equation in which economic collapse justified selective death. The prosecutor asked one final question. Did anyone tell you explicitly to kill Caleb Rourke? No. Did anyone tell you to stop? Mercer paused. No. That pause echoed louder than any confession. Thomas Wexler testified reluctantly. He attempted to frame Tier 3 as heightened legal response. But under cross-examination, the prosecutor displayed the internal chat. Rourke issue resolved. External stabilization successful. Exposure index reduced. Wexler hesitated. Resolved means complaint withdrawn, he said. But the complaint was already withdrawn before his death. The prosecutor replied. No answer. One board member attempted a similar strategy. Language misinterpreted. Consultants independent. No direct instruction. But financial forensic testimony showed structured payments immediately following each resolution. The juries understand patterns. The verdict arrived after 9 hours of deliberation. Daniel Mercer, guilty on all counts. Liam Kessler, guilty per plea agreement. Thomas Wexler, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. 2 board members, guilty of conspiracy and obstruction. 1 investor liaison, guilty of attempted conspiracy, lesser count due to timing. Aldercrest Holdings stock collapsed within 48 hours. Regulatory investigations expanded nationally. Rachel did not attend the sentencing hearing. She remained in her office reviewing Caleb Rook's reopened case file. Because verdict does not resurrect, it only categorizes. 3 families would never receive their sons back. Ethan Vale's roommate had testified about the calendar invite. Marcus Tilden's sister had described him as cautious. Caleb Rourke's mother had said he was proud of filing his complaint. Rachel closed the file slowly. The unresolved case from years earlier had finally aligned. Not because of persistence alone, but because escalation had made concealment impossible. That realization did not feel like victory. It felt like inevitability. She walked once more to the river bridge at dusk. Traffic overhead. Water below. Steel unchanged. But she saw the scene differently now. At first, it had seemed like a disposal site. Now it felt like a message. Not from the killer. From the system. Remove the shoes. Remove the identifiers. Remove the risk. Reduce index to 0. Rachel stood still until the last light faded. Block 9 ends with convictions secured, institutional complicity legally confirmed, and the exposure index mechanism dismantled in court. Justice, in formal terms, has been delivered. But for Rachel, the case closes not with relief. It closes with understanding. Sentencing took place on a gray morning thick with press and silence. Daniel Mercer received 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He stood when the verdict was read. He did not look at the gallery. He did not look at the families. He looked straight ahead. When offered the opportunity to speak, he declined apology. History will understand necessity, he said quietly. The judge did not respond. Liam Kessler received a reduced but substantial sentence in exchange for cooperation. Thomas Wexler and the board members were sentenced to decades in federal custody for conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction. Aldercrest Holdings dissolved within the year. Assets liquidated. Regulatory reforms implemented. Risk committee structures across the industry re-examined under public scrutiny. On paper, the system corrected. Detective Rachel Monroe did not measure closure in reforms. She measured it in absence of movement. No additional Tier 3 lists surfaced. No new consultants flagged. No late-night consultation reviews sent. The exposure index was dismantled. But Rachel understood something fundamental. The index itself had not been born from violence. It had been born from language. Language that reclassified people as liabilities. Language that abstracted human cost into market stability. Language that allowed operators like Mercer to believe they were preserving order. Weeks after sentencing, Rachel met privately with Caleb Rourke's mother. No cameras. No formal statement. She returned a small personal item recovered from archived evidence. A watch Caleb had worn the night he died. It wasn't an accident, Rachel said plainly. Caleb's mother nodded slowly. I always knew, she replied. Some families sense the fracture long before the file is reopened. Rachel left that meeting with a weight that was not relief. It was recalibration, because this case had intersected with her unresolved past investigation into Aldercrest years ago. Back then, she had lacked proof. Now she had proof, but only because escalation had turned quiet suppression into overt murder. That fact lingered. Justice had required blood. Months later, the river beneath the Eastern Bridge flowed the same way it always had. Morning commuters returned to routine. Maintenance crews cleared debris. Graffiti layered over old tags. No plaque marked the place where Ethan Vale had been found. No memorial for Marcus Tilden near the culvert. No visible trace of Caleb Rourke's fall in the stairwell months earlier. Urban landscapes erased quickly. Rachel stood beneath the bridge one final time, before formally closing the task force file. Roland would later narrate the conclusion in restrained cadence: 3 men flagged as risk. 3 men removed. A system that mistook silence for stability, and a list that nearly continued. But what he would not narrate was the quieter truth Rachel carried forward. Every institution builds tools to manage uncertainty. Risk charts, compliance tiers, mitigation strategies. Most remain within law. Some drift, and when drift meets ambiguity, individuals decide what language means. Mercer decided Tier 3 meant emanation. Wexler decided silence equaled success. The board decided stability justified abstraction. Each step small, each justification incremental, until 3 names were crossed out. Back at headquarters, Rachel removed the Aldercrest board from her office wall. She did not discard it. She archived it. Because unresolved cases do not disappear. They wait for pattern recognition. Before leaving for the night, she opened a new file. Unrelated case. Different sector. Different set of discrepancies flagged by a junior analyst at a biotech startup. No deaths. No violence. Just irregular financial projections and internal complaints. She circled the analyst's name. Not as risk. As protection. Because prevention rarely receives headlines. But it prevents riverbanks from becoming staging grounds. As she turned off the office light, her phone vibrated once. Unknown number. No voicemail left. She did not call back. Not yet. Some signals require patience before interpretation. The exposure index case would be cited in legal textbooks, in compliance seminars, in corporate governance reform panels. It would be framed as an anomaly. But Rachel knew better. It was not anomaly. It was warning. When language drifts far enough from consequence, someone eventually acts on its darkest interpretation. The file closed formally at 16:40, 3 hours on a Thursday. 3 confirmed victims. 1 attempted prevented. 6 convictions. Institution dismantled. Yet Rachel did not feel finality. She felt vigilance. Because stability achieved through silence always carries the risk of repetition. And somewhere, in another boardroom, another column might already be forming. Block 10 concludes episode 15 with convictions secured, systemic reform initiated, and Detective Rachel Monroe carrying forward a sharpened awareness. Risk does not begin when violence occurs. It begins when language makes violence conceivable.